Good morning, everyone. We're going to begin our study here, just finishing off Judges chapter 12. Can we begin with a word of prayer? Dear Father in heaven, we are very grateful again that we can open your word together. We ask, Lord, that we can have your presence, that your Holy Spirit that inspired the scriptures can be here to enlighten us. We know, Lord, that the things we are looking at are new to many of us in the sense that the responsibility that lies before us is becoming clearer and clearer. And we sometimes don't know how to take the things that we find in your word, how these things written thousands of years ago can apply to us directly at this time. But we know, Lord, that you are leading, and we just ask for your continued guidance. Be with each person as they struggle through this world of sin and suffering, as they struggle through the problems in their lives. We ask, Lord, that we can have faith and confidence in you and what you are doing in spite of what we see. Be with us now as we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so not as many of us here this morning as I expected, because some of the usuals aren't here, but we were on Thursday, we were finishing off Judges chapter 12. And Ran and I were just discussing a little bit earlier. I was dealing with these verses here, Judges 12 verse 5, Judges 12 verse 6, and 12 verse 7. Now, the symbolism of 12:6, of course, we know that's the 1260. It's also the shekels in Daniel chapter 5. All kinds of representations that we have in this movement. And we also have the 42,000 of the Ephraimites that are slain, which is a symbol of the 1260 of the 42 months. And I suggested, well, and also we have December 6th, which connects us to what was happening in the movement at the end of our 777 structure. And then I suggested that it's December 26th. And Stephen, who's just coming on here now, he sort of said, well, I don't see that we can do that. Aran and I were talking about this. And Aran, how did you word this, what we were doing with the 12:6 and making it December 26th? Get a way of
Just said it with, yeah, it's a set union.
Okay, and we've seen this lots of times, right? So just because one number is left out, it doesn't mean you can't do that. And an example of this would be the 153 and the 1533, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Stephen, you can see that?
Yeah, I suppose that is an example that we had used. Yes.
Yeah. Now, and then I was thinking about verse 5, where the Gileadites took the passages of Jordan before the Ephraimites. Now, I was thinking about what happened on December 25th. So that's 2021. And what I see is that there is this battle going on within this movement. And what you found on December 25th, to me, that's kind of like the Gileadites taking the passages of the Jordan before the Ephraimites. It is, we're on the opposite sides of things in a sense. That is the 777 years that you found on that day from 457 to 321. Because we know that December 25th we had as a symbol of the Sunday law, right?
Yes.
And so when it comes to this shibboleth, this is a lack of understanding on the part of the Ephraimites, a detail that they're not able to frame, to pronounce correctly. And so there's sort of this departure in this, in a sense, within this movement of these two lines of study. Because before that, primarily we were still studying together. After that, it became much more difficult with Colin's prediction. And so I would take Judges 12:5 as also representing December 25th, and Judges, just as we did with Judges 12:6 being December 26th. And then it finishes with this 12:7. And the thing that I'm still, obviously we have the 6 years being a symbol of 6 times 6 times 6, a symbol of the Sunday law. But it's tied to this symbol 12:7. And 12:7, of course, is July 21st. That's midnight. It also has the symbol of being the bombing of Pearl Harbor, if we took it as a date in 1941. It's also, on the charts dealing with, so it does represent the midst of the week as well. So there's lots of things about Judges 12 verse 7. Now, I still, in some ways, think it's odd that we can take these verses as we've gone through Judges in this way, but part of it started with Judges 2 verse 1, representing 2001. And that would be an example where we take a date and some of the numbers are missing as well. So we've started with that premise once we noticed that in Judges chapter 2, that this is representing the history of this movement from, Judges 2 verse 1 to 2 verse 23, which would be 2023. And we've seen to be able to have done this actually quite easily in the sense of they fall into place. It doesn't mean there isn't a lot of work that we've had to do because this is months of work. And hopefully we're not, being myopic when it comes to looking at this. That we're looking at this rather broadly. But the fact that we can take Judges and we can apply it to this movement in this particular way still kind of strikes me as rather amazing. Something that's written so long ago, and yet it's talking to us at this particular time. We're not saying that that's the primary application of these verses by any stretch of the imagination, but that God has designed within his word to illustrate our history, to give us instruction and direction at the very time in which our feet are upon the path, I think is rather remarkable. And I hope people recognize that this is quite amazing, that we can do this, that we can be looking at these verses that are speaking about our present situation, that we happen to be studying them at this time. And I've noted how we're going to have the anniversary of starting this series of studies on December 26th. And, that's going to be number 252 in the studies. And then, of course, when we get to the end of that line in January 11th, 2023, that's going to be study number 264. So when we take all of these symbols, we can take 12 verse 5 being December 25th. And I know Dwight missed some of this here, but we were looking at Judges 12 verse 5, just like we could take 12 verse 6 and see it as December 26th, we could take 12:5 and see it as December 25th. And I was mentioning that Gileadites taking the passages of Jordan. This is where we come to this, Stephen finding the 777 years from 457 to 321 on that date, right, on the very date that Colin presents his study on Trump.
Right.
Is us taking the passages of Jordan, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's
okay.
Logical.
Yeah. and then we take each of these verses and we find all of these symbols in them. So the shibboleth is this, they're not able to frame, to pronounce it correctly or right. That is, there's a part of this message that they can't understand, that they can't grasp. In a sense, it's hidden from them. Does that make sense?
Repeat that, please.
So they can't pronounce the shibboleth, right? They can
Okay.
only sibboleth. So it's close to the message, but it's short by a dot of the shin, right?
Okay.
So that would represent this change that's happened in the message, that the one group can understand, they can pronounce, they can frame it, but the other group cannot. Right? Because we're taking the men as Ephraim to represent those in this movement who are at odds with the message of Jephthah, which is the message of July 18th, or more specifically, we're saying that this has to do with this message that we're presently studying. Right. So this understanding of the lines. So then I was looking at 12 verse 7. Of course, we looked at the symbols there, Pearl Harbor, on the 1843 chart, the 12 times 7, connected with time in the sense of the Metonic cycle. Also, of course, July 21st, midnight, if we read it in reverse.
Right.
And then the thing about the 6 years, all that I could gather from that is 216, which of course represents 6 times 6 times 6, because 6 years, of course, times 360 is 2160. So we've had that symbol many places. So anyway, that's where, we had finished off with that. And well, we had finished that before. I just wanted to review that. And then we had started on Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon. Oh, and the one other thing too about taking the date, 12/6 is representing December 26th. We have an example of that with 1533 and 153. So
would we also be able, when we go into 13:5 also being like 13:35?
Well, yeah, I didn't look at 13:5 yet, but yeah, we could possibly do that if the story gives us illustration to do that.
Okay.
Right. So what we have done is we'd already sort of established this without using these symbols, right? So once we have the symbols there as a witness, I mean, they're not the reason. We didn't, find these verses and then decide, well, they must mean this because, they have these symbols per se, right?
Right.
And of course, we started with this whole premise with Judges 2 verse 1, which represents 2001. And of course, the 2 zeros are not there. And 223 representing 2023, of course, one of the zeros is not there. So we have all this precedent built up in how we're approaching this. And the fact that this is illustrating the history where we are right now, that it's light at our feet presently, I think is remarkable. And then we dealt with Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon. And we haven't really nailed everything down here. What we do know is that the 7 years, the 10 years, and the 8 years represent July 18th. So this represents 7/18, that order, especially in how Hebrews write their numbers, because they would write 10/8 to write 18. Because they don't use Arabic numerals. Um, so, and also this representation of 718. What's the significance of that?
July 18th.
Okay, July 18th, but why 718 itself? I mean, I know it's July 18th. Right, so we had from the siege of Washington, D.C. on December 6, 2021 to December 24th, 2022, which is coming up, 718 days. So 718 has shown up in spans of time, but especially in connection with where we are right now. Okay, so because normally we look at 187 or other things like that, but here we have it being represented as 718 or 710 plus 8. So we'd write it as 718 if we we're going to write it this way. And so in this passage too, I mean, we're dealing with this history of December 25th. So we could, even if we went back to 1224 or 12 verse 4, that can be December 24th. Whether we're going to do this all the way through, I don't think so. But we have where we're making this invitation is for December 24th for these groups to come together, the American and the Canadian group and our group. So, and if you look at this, it says Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. And the men of Gilead smote Ephraim because they said, ye Gileadites are fugitives of Ephraim among the Ephraimites and among the Manassites. So this is the accusation, right, in a sense of what we are doing. So I don't know if we want to go back and take that as 1224, 1225, 1226. But it seems possible we could do that. We could take this whole section and line it up that way. So that would connect these three judges who there's no enemy that's oppressing them that's being mentioned at all. And there are some symbols here that we've looked at. So just in reviewing this, Ibzan of Bethlehem, what was it that we noticed about this? What are the symbols there? We have the house of bread.
Right.
And
we have 30 that's repeated 3 times.
yeah.
Plus you have the fact that he was judging that, at least that portion of Israel, for 7 years.
Okay. Yeah, so we have the 7 years. And of course, that's a 25-20 in and of itself.
Right.
Okay. And anything else there?
What was it about his name?
Well, it means splendid.
Right.
Or splendor or something like that. Actually, okay, so when we look at Strong's, Strong says it means splendid. I'm not quite sure how Strong's gets that. I mean, he doesn't give basically, other than he gives H76, but that means to belch forth as an inflammatory pustule, as eruption or blains. So So I'm not sure how we get splendid from that. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, an inflammatory pustule is anything but splendid.
Yeah, yeah. So, but that's the definition he gives us for whatever reason.
Now, one of the comments from the chat does have an interesting point to bring up, because is there a comparative between Judges 12:9 and Judges 10:4?
Okay, so 10:4 was, and he had 30 sons that rode on 30 ass colts and had 30 cities, which are called. Yeah, and so that's one of the things we'd have to look at too. We know about the 30 there in Tola and JR. Now, so this is going to be in dealing with the situation with Abimelech, right? And Abimelech is this inheritance from Parminder's movement, right? It's a I mean, we dealt with this. Now, what did we do with the 30? Did we have any? I mean, to me, it's a representation of a month.
Well, first off, after this, we noted that Jair, who was from Gilead, judged Israel 22 years, which of course is a symbol of restoration.
Yeah. So we were placing this. So this was after Abimelech.
Right.
And yeah, so here again, at this point in the Tola and Jair, we didn't, it's actually very parallel in the sense that you have a major enemy that's defeated, and you just have basically a defense, right? There isn't a particular enemy that's oppressing them, right?
Okay.
So we have that same sort of parallel there. So could we just say that this Tola and Jair are representing basically the same history? Because I think what I did with that, the 30 there, because we had these 3 30s and they represented 3 days, but they also represented the months, and that connected us to the story of Ezra.
But didn't we also take the entire time period of Tola and Jair and relate that to the 45
Yeah,
on
yeah,
on the chart?
yeah. So it brings us to the same history all the time. At the end of these end of these oppressions, you have this period basically of peace where you have some other judges.
Right.
And that seems to be what we're pointed to here in this story as well in chapter 12. But also in connection with Judges 9, when we had drawn that on a line, we had these 88 months, which we had from the story of Ezra, and that brought us to April 5th, 2030. So, and then we had, of course, we looked at the midterm elections, and we had the 2,688 days with that IRS form number 2688 being this application for additional extension of time. And that pointed us to April 5th. But it doesn't bring us into that history, right? The whole idea here is that we're brought to the end of this period. And then 88 months follow. So this begins the divorce, right? In the story of Ezra, the 88 days. So yeah, so that's a good point that that we can see these parallel between these two sections. So yeah, so when we get to, whoops, here, went too far. Um, and then you have this 30 mentioned as well, 3 times, right? In both of them. Is it not 3 times? "30 sons ruled in 30 Ascots, and they had 30 cities." Yeah. So we have the 30 mentioned 3 times again.
Right.
So and try to figure it out, what this means particularly, I don't know. The only thing I can say is that if you took this as 30, 30, 30 as a number, that number is interesting in that it's divisible by 666. 455 times. And it's also divisible by 777, 390 times. And it's
Can I ask a question, Theodore?
Yeah.
What about the 30 daughters?
yeah, but they only mentioned the 33 times. So I mean, the 30 daughters in the sense of there's 30 sons, 30 daughters, right?
Right.
And he took he took in 30 daughters, right? So there's 30 daughters sent out and 30 daughters taken in. Now, of course, the 30 daughters would have 30 husbands, but the point here is that 30 is mentioned 3 times, not 4 times. Right? So, I mean, and daughters, of course, can represent churches. So I'm not sure what this particularly means. I mean, in the context of the strange wives, right, and Ezra, this is dealing with marriages. But here in this case, it's not a divorce, it's a marriage. Marriages are occurring here. But anyway, so this number of, if I took it as 30, 30, 30, so there, I mean, it has lots of divisors. One of the divisors is like it can be divided by any number, like 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, not 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 6, 6, 6, 7, 7, 7, and so those are the only ones. It's not divisible by 9, 9, 9. It's not divisible by 4, 4, 4.
What about 273?
Yeah, it's divisible by 273 as well. Yeah, so that one I missed. But the 666 and the 555 and the 777, I mean, the 5 virgins is a symbol. So 5 is an important symbol, 666 for the mark of the beast in our line 777, but also the 273. And it's divisible by 273. 1,110 times. And that can represent January 11th. Correct?
Okay, yes.
Right. So if that can represent January 11th, which is where we come to at the end of this line in 2023, that just can be another symbol attaching this to this line, to that period of time. Okay. But whether, whether we do that, I think we can do that. We can just line up the 30s and make them 300 and 3,030. I don't see a reason why we can't analyze it as a symbol that way. But I think the primary symbol is relating to the 3 days and the months, the symbol for a month. But it also ties us to chapter 10. So we can see that this is the same period. The symbol of the 2520, of course, 7 years. And then the house of bread, this having to do with, God's word. And other symbol there dealing with that, because that can deal with the manna as well, right? That was sort of the idea. Right, Dwight, you had brought that up. Because Christ is the bread of life, the bread that came down from heaven.
Right.
And then I connected that period from April 26, 1990, which was part of this structure, with November 24th. So it's 14,588 days, the number of days from when the manna first fell to when they go out to gather the manna and it no longer has fallen. So there's that whole structure of that diagram that led to April 5th, 2030. And then so then after him, Elon, a Zebulonite, right? And we know that the symbol of Zebulon, that was Odilio's study dealing with the 57,400 days, I think. Yeah, from May 23rd, 1863 to July 18, 2020. All right, so he had this structure dealing with his tokens, harbingers, and signs. His study on that, which I expanded a bit more. I could probably show you these diagrams that I'm looking at. Just right, so this is the diagram that I worked out based upon what Odilio had presented. And I thought this was an important study. So Odilio did the study dealing with the mandates, which was an important study. It gave us a number of these symbols and how to count things. He gave this at the very time when we were looking at the numbering of the tribes of Israel. So it was timely, and it helped us to understand more about these numberings of the tribes, how they relate to periods of time. And I still haven't finished all of that work on that. But so we can see the Zebulonites, that's a message that goes to July 18th. So in the context here with the Zebulonites that judged Israel 10 years, we know that that's a test, and July 18th is a test. Is it not?
Well, I would think so.
Yeah. And then the symbols attached there are the 40 sons and the 30 nephews that rode on 70 colts. And he judged Israel 8 years. So the significance there, a lot of different things, but the 4 and the 3, a division of the 7 trumpets, 7 churches. Even you could divide all of the 7 last plagues, of course. So there's, and you can also really, there's so many things that you could divide as 4 and 3, so many different 7s that are divided that way. So
What about the 70 on the end of that?
well, right. So the 40 and the 3 and the 30, right? That's just together, that's 70. So you got the 70 representing, of course, Leviticus 26, the 70 years, the captivity. So you got that as well.
That's the 70 ass coats, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, 70 of them. Right. And then we have the symbol of Islam there as well. So this thing that we've seen suggested is that the message of Islam and its significance prophetically will become more prominent as this message moves on. Right now, it's not really being talked about too much because we made these predictions regarding Islam that never came to pass. But those predictions still stand in the sense of what they mean, just not when, because we looked at the structure incorrectly as far as predicting when. We had the right place, right? We had the right event in a sense, but that event was placed incorrectly. Though we have the right time, but that time is part of a bigger structure. So the event is still symbolically valid. Just like you could with the Millerites. I mean, you can say they had the wrong time for the second coming, but they had the correct day, the Day of Atonement. But that event was still correct in a sense, because that Day of Atonement is connected to the second coming. Because when the Day of Atonement closes, it's also connected to those events. The Day of Atonement is more than a single Earth day. It's a period of time. And Abdon, so we had Elon, and then we have Abdon, right? So, which has the 40 sons, 30 nephews. And then he's this. So when they mention Abdon, it's kind of interesting. So they say, after him, Abdon, the son of Hillel, a Pirathonite, judged Israel. And then they're going to have the verse dealing with the 40 sons, 30 nephews, and the 70 colts, and that he judged Israel 8 years. And then they're going to say, and Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Pirathonite, died and was buried in Pirathon in the land of Ephraim in the mount of the Amalekites. Now, why would they have to list him again as Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Pirathonite? Why would they have to repeat that? Couldn't they just say Abdon? I mean, they do the same thing with Elon the Zebulunite, and they do the same thing. But they don't do that with Isban. They don't say Ibzan the Bethlehem. He's just of Bethlehem, right? So he's not called a Bethlehemite. But it doesn't say then Ibzan of Bethlehem was buried at Bethlehem. I mean, maybe that's why the difference. But why do they have to repeat that? I mean, is there any significance in that, in this structure of how they repeat these things? I need to go back to the Bible here so you can see that.
So that's a is that a relative of Zebulon?
Relative of who?
Zebulon.
I don't know who you mean.
I'm sorry, I got the wrong one. I apologize.
Okay. Okay, so what we can say about Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon is it refers to this period of time where there is no oppressor. And there are 3 here mentioned, where in Judges 10 we have the 2, which I can never remember names, Tola and Jair, right? So they're going to parallel each other.
A question.
Yeah.
With what the translators were looking at we have Ibzan being a type of civil judge in Northeast Israel.
Yeah.
They say the same thing about Elon,
Mhm.
and they say the same thing about Abdon,
Yeah. So they're civil judges. Yeah.
but all in Northeast Israel.
Yeah. Okay.
So if they're basically all serving the same area from, during this time period. Now that's not an area that the Philistines would have attacked. That would have been more the Ammonites
Hmm.
on the east, right?
Yeah.
So we have Ibzan of Bethlehem. Now, is Bethlehem of Judah?
Well, it beat Bethlehem Ephratah. So I would think, I mean, it would be Bethlehem. Is it in Judah? I mean, it becomes in Judah later, right? Isn't that what happens? How does that work with Bethlehem? Remember when we were studying Bethlehem?
Right.
It wasn't originally placed in Judah, was it?
That's what I'm thinking, that it was not.
Yeah.
That it was more in that of Benjamin.
Yeah, it's going to be that city, I would think. I don't think this is going to be, I don't know. I don't know of any other Bethlehem.
Okay. Now we have Elon, who is of the tribe of Zebulun,
Mm-hmm.
and he's buried in Ajalon in the country of Zebulun. So we have that to consider. And then Abdon, son of Hillel, a
Mm-hmm.
Pirathonite. What's important about Pirathon?
It's well, it's mentioned in 2 Samuel and in Chronicles.
Because he's the son of praising. And Pirathon, I mean, it only comes up 5 times in the entire Old Testament.
Yeah, so I don't know particularly anything about it.
Because in First Chronicles 11:31, it gives reference that this pertains to the children of Benjamin, Benaniah the Pirathonite.
Yeah.
Okay, now another comment from the chat dealing with the 7, 10, and 8 years. That 7 could represent perfection or Sabbath 7 times 25/20, which we've already stated. 8 could represent the priesthood or resurrection,
Mhm.
and 10 being a test or remnant.
Mhm. And that's all built into the 187, from which you count 187 days from the first day of the first month to the 10th day of the 7th month, which would tie into all those symbols already, right?
Agreed.
I mean, so, I mean, what we can say for sure is that this relates to the time that we're in. Or we're coming to, I guess, with this invitation to the other groups. Whatever it means particularly. We have these symbols that tie us to the end of this structure. So, and you know, we have these 30 as well. So remember, if we take 187 months, we had that symbol which we got at the beginning of this understanding of the lines, where we were studying about the covenants with Abraham, right? So we had taken the chapters, chapter 12 times chapter 15 times chapter times chapter 17. So we got 67,320, which was divided by 187. And that, I just do there. Gave us 360 years. So those are 360 prophetic years. And then I had also noticed the similarity of that number to 67920, which is the number of days from the first day of the first month in 1844 to the first day of the first month in 2030, which is 2,300 literal months. And then we also had 2,300, or we had 187 years and 20 prophetic months that also led us to April 5th. So these 30s, they also tie us to 2030 in various different ways as symbols regarding months. But still, this history is just dealing with the history ending in 2023, but giving us these symbols that point to 2030. Is that fair enough? Is it clear enough?
Didn't we address this last time?
Yeah. But I just wanted to be clear to people that I think that what's being given to us right now is the same thing that's been being given to us for a long time, going back, 10 months at least. But shortly after Colin had given his study on Trump, we were able to see that we have this date 2030, and that this continues, that this message continues. It's not ending here. The Sunday law is not coming in 2022. That this movement is still this work to do. And I'm just saying that this is helping us again and again to see the same message. But this is a message where these judges aren't dealing with an oppressor. And the question, why is that? These judges aren't delivering them from an oppressor. That work has already been done. So what would that mean for this movement moving forward? Is this just demonstrating the development of this message from now on? That we're not going to have an oppressive message that is a false message mixed in with what we're doing?
What if there is not an external component, such as what we were seeing with the others when we're dealing with the other nations that came against Israel, like the Philistines or the Ammonites.
Yeah, well, they did have internal enemies before, right? In a sense,
In a sense,
right?
but this is, we're noting at this point that there is not an external message creating an issue.
Right. But this is the development of a message still in this period of time that's going to be given us.
Okay.
And also we have these civil judges. I mean, we don't have a king, right? So God isn't calling us to organize our movement in the way that they were trying to organize it previously, right?
Right.
But yet there still is, and these are messages. So these are messages that are going to be coming to this movement, but not in opposition to an oppressor.
Okay.
I'm just doing a calculation here. I know it's kind of frustrating when I'm just doing this on my own here without you seeing what I'm doing. So I have a suggestion, because this is representing a message and it gives us these periods of time, but we can see them symbolically, right?
Right.
And maybe in some way these messages are combined. So what I mean is, what if we took 7 times 8, or 7 plus 8 plus 10, but divided it by 3?
What do we wind up with?
You get 25. Let me see, hang on. You get 25 divided by 3 is 8.33333. So you get this number is, and if this was a span of time, I mean, there's different ways to interpret it. If we did it as just prophetic time, this would be 8 years.
Okay. I'm going to change up a little bit for you.
Okay.
And you're going to have to do a little rounding here.
Okay.
7 times 10 times 8.
Okay, so that's another way we could do it. So you're going to get 560.
Now divide that by 3.
Okay. Well, yeah, you get 186 plus 2/3.
So if you round up, you're at 187.
Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting that we can do that and still get 187. Which we never, I don't think I've ever thought of that one before. Okay, so we can have 187. Now, if we have, if we added them together and divided it by 3, we get 8 years and 120 prophetic days if we used it as prophetic years. Now, if we took 8.3 times, and we just took it as literal time, so that would be 3 times 365.25, you would get 3,043.75 days. So that's 8.33 years. And if we were to count from, well, if we went to April 5th, 2030, so that's the date that we have. I mean, we have other dates as well that are connected symbolically, but if we just took this number 30, well, we'll do it at 3044. The interesting thing about that number is that's you know what the length of a month is. So it's dividing these into months, because a month, on the Gregorian calendar is 30.4375 roughly days in length. So here, I'm just going to show you this calculation so you see what I'm doing. Easier for people here. So I'm just going to do this whole calculation again. I'll bring up my scientific calculator there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we take 8 plus 7 plus 10, well, that's 15 plus 10, so that's going to be 25, right? And then we're going to divide it by 3. And we get this number, which is 8 years and one third of a year, right? So 8 1/3 years. And then I'm just going to put it into days. So I'm going to multiply it by 365.25. And I get this number here, 3,043.75. Now, if I was to do the length of a month, so simple way of looking at it would be if you take 365.25, and you can see why, because I'm just dividing this by 30, or pardon me, 365.25 divided by 12, I'm going to get this number, right? So that's the same number, but that's not that unusual based upon the fact of how I'm doing this calculation, because this is years. And it's just, so I'm taking these numbers of years and dividing them by 3 and then multiplying them by 365. Does that make sense to people what I did? Can we see why that ends up being the same number? I mean, it's just part of analyzing these numbers.
Okay.
So, but what does that mean then in particular about this period of time? Is 8.3333 years. So 8 1/3 years, if it's divided by 3, gives me a number that's related to the length of the month. So do people see? I mean, I know it's a little bit of a math thing, but
Can you explain to me why you added the first 3 and divided it by 3?
okay. So what I was looking at, as I said, there's 3 messages, and they're going to occur. They're going to be in a period of time, right? But each of those messages is given a specific number: 7 years, 8 years, and 10 years. So the idea is if I add them together and I find out what the average length of time, maybe it would relate to the period of time that we already had marked from April 5th, 2030. Right?
Thank you.
Okay. So that's the way my brain was thinking. Now,
Thank you.
Dwight multiplied them and divided them by 3, and we got a number that approaches 187, which is
And why did he multiply them?
because we can sometimes add numbers and sometimes multiply them.
Yeah, okay, so basically that's how I work my stuff is I'll, as I'm seeing these numbers laid out, I'll add them or subtract them or divide them or, and to see what numbers come up in the relationship, you know, I mean, you've got 6 numbers, you know, or 4 numbers and you do it in 16 different ways, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay, so now we're looking at this calculation. So I added these 3 years together. These three.
Theodore, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Why did Dwight add 7, 10, and 8?
I didn't add 7, 10, and 8.
I mean, I multiplied them, I'm sorry.
The reason, as Theodore was adding them, we've had conversations in the past about using different numbers additively or multiplicativity. And my point at times has been to add the numbers together, and Theodore's has usually been to multiply them.
Okay, I just curious. I just wanted to know.
Just
Sure.
like the gematria of Lamech, you know, we can add it together, but if we multiply it, we get 18720.
Right.
Okay,
right.
all right. All right.
But,
I mean,
but
there's,
so here we have this period of time. So
right,
this period of time, we have multiplied it by a year, right? That is, we took these 25, we divided it by 3, and then we multiplied it by a year. And then we divided it by, and if you divide a year by 12, you get this period of time. So the question is, why are we getting this number that is the length of the Gregorian month, or 100 times the length of the Gregorian month? Is there something that's just natural? That is, if I took another number, right? So here's what I'll do. I'll just take another arbitrary number. I'll take 145, right? So that's, or maybe I'll do this. I'll just do 44. I'll divide it by 3, and I'll get this number, right? So this number is not related to anything. It's just a number. And then I'm going to multiply this number times 365. 0.25. When I get this number, whatever that number is, right? Now, that number doesn't relate to the length of a month in any way, right?
Right, but it's got a whole lot of 6s behind it.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's just, yeah. So that's just 2/3. It's 14 2/3, right? But when I took this 833, I did get a number that was related to the length of a month, 100 times the length of a Gregorian month. So what Aran is saying is 12 times 8/3 equals 100. So that's why, right? So he's saying that what we're doing is we're producing something that is 100. So we're just, and then if I take the number 365, so what I have to do here is I have to take this number then, where's my calculation that I had here? Okay, so 365 divided by 12 ends up being this number, which is the length of a month. And so it just has to do with the fact that this 8.33 is related to, how can you explain it, Aran? I'm terrible at explaining math things. I know you wrote.
Yeah, just basically, if you multiply 12 and 8 1/3 together, you get 100.
Right, right. So what I'm trying to say is that this number, 8 1/3 that we get is, it's a very specific number, right? Like it wouldn't happen with some other number. So this number, this calculation that we did, symbolically it's highly unlikely that we're going to add 3 numbers together. divide them by 3, and get a number that is, if multiplied by 12, will equal 100, right? Correct, Iran?
Right.
That this isn't inevitable. It's something that has to do with this specific calculation that we did. And so when I then noticed that it was, when I multiplied it by 365, I got a number that was 100 times greater than the length of the month. That was not something that you would expect from a number that we just randomly used. That is, we took the number 7, 8, and 10, added them together, divided them by 3, and we got this number. So this would be a remarkable coincidence, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this isn't something that's inevitable. It doesn't happen with any number. All right, so this is so that's the point I'm trying to make here by looking at this. If we do it with another number, we're not going to get the same result. So we have to have those specific numbers that make up 187. Another way of looking at it, so I know people who don't like math, this can be rather, but if I took, okay, well, and the thing is, we have to do it as 10, right? We just couldn't add up 187, get 16, and we wouldn't do that. So it's taking this as a 10. The way that the Jews write a number is they don't write 18. They write 10 or 10 and 8 to write 18. Right? So they're going to write, 7 years, and they're going to write 10 years, and they're going to write 8 years. And we can add those together. So, and then we get this number, right? 25, and we divide it by 3 because there's 3 of them, and we're taking the average, and we get this number that if multiplied by 10 or by 12, we get 100, right? So that's the coincidence. Okay, I hope.
And it's been my experience, there are no coincidences
Well,
in the Bible.
Oh, there's no coincidences in the Bible. There are coincidences. Coincidences happen. Now, the number of days that I got in.
Besides all that, if we don't like learning math, we need to learn it anyway. Don't you think? If we
Well-
don't like doing this, we got to learn it anyway, right?
Yeah,
It's advantageous.
yeah.
Well, our situation is pretty direct. Do we believe Daniel 8:13 and 8:14? I mean, that certain saint which spake, the actual Hebrew is that of a wonderful numberer. So are
Right.
numbers important to Christ?
Okay.
Yes.
Now you can see,
Amen.
I just did, so I took this number here. I'll go back, I'll go to 2030 again.
Well, just for a second, before you go to 2030,
Yeah,
giving you a quick support. Bringing up Daniel 8:13.
yeah.
Is that also not a different way of expressing 8 1/3?
Okay. So 13 is 8 1/3.
Right.
In a sense, yes, because you could write 8 1/3.
So does that not support the calculation you just presented where we have 8.333 to infinity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so we can see this 8.33 is a symbol of 813 then.
Okay, so if we apply it directly with Daniel 8:13, we are applying it in reference to the wonderful numberer.
Right?
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does to me.
Me too.
Okay,
So if I go to April 5th, 2030 and I subtract 3043, so it's 3043.75. I mean, I could put that in, I guess. Right? So I'm going to subtract that number that we got. A number of days, and that's going to bring me to December 4th, 2021. I don't know what that means particularly, because we don't mark that date, but it is about 1 year after 2020, right? December 4th, 5th, and 6th, 2020. So we have this 1 year anniversary, so to speak. So that's one way in which I could look at that. You know, I could, it brings us back into this history. But that's initially how I was thinking to look at it, is taking the number of days. But we can just take this as a symbol itself without having to do this, right? That is, we can look at what's here in this period of time, and we can see this relates to the wonderful number. It relates to these symbols. Now, 8 1/3 years is what we end up getting as the average, right? And that can be a symbol of 813, right? 8 1/3, which can be the digits 813. So I would think that's fairly remarkable as well. So we've learned something here about what this message is about of Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon. It's actually an establishment of the message that this movement has been following from the beginning, right?
Right.
And it connects us to Millerite history. I mean, April 5th, 2030 is connected to Millerite history from April 19th, 1844, 2,300 months to April 5th, 2030. And we have all kinds of other ways in which we arrived at that, the week of Christ, etc. So here we have in these insignificant judges that nobody really pays any attention to, we have all of these symbols that relate to our understanding of chronology and of numbers. Because it has these numbers here, right? And the 30, 30, 30, we can relate to, of course, as we saw, to 666, 777, 273, and also to 1111, right? So 1111 is January 11th, 2023.
Theodore, I know I'm slow, but I'm gonna mention it. If you drop the 0,
What?
If you drop the 0333, is that what you're saying? I can't hear you, William. All I heard is you dropped the 0 and then you dropped off.
if you drop the 0, you have a test. The 10 would be a test, right? On the
Oh,
100.
from 100?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we already have a test here. I mean, so we know that this message, the message of July 18th, is a type of test for this movement, right?
Right.
It's already established. And we know, of course, it symbolizes from the first day of the first month to the 10th day of the 7th month. So it symbolizes the Day of Atonement, which is judgment, which is a test, of course. But we have all of these different symbols, the 30, 30, 30, the 40 and 30, as well as the 70, which is 70 and 10. Right? So 70 is 20, 20, 20 plus 10 to get 70, right? So they go 20 plus 20 plus 20 plus 10. That's the way they do this. Now, in this case, if you look at the Hebrew, it just says 70. So it's not using 70 and 10 in Hebrew to do this. They just use the word 70, the shibium. Anything else that we can see here regarding, I mean, we got Abdon, which means servitude, and Hillel, which means praising, right? So we've looked at that. Anything else that we're not looking at?
Yeah, the 560, you know, if you multiply them, 10
Yeah.
times 7 times 8,
Yeah,
there was 560 days for the siege in Jerusalem. From 587 to 586, there was 560 days.
yeah. So you're saying from the siege in 587 BC, which was on that was on January 5th.
5.
Yeah. And then you count 560 days. And that brings you to the siege. Yeah, so that brings you to the siege.
And July 18, isn't it?
The end of the
5, 6.
So that's when the walls are broken down. It brings you to July 18th.
Yes.
Not on our calendar converter though, because our calendar converter is actually incorrect. But with that, because we're using the
Babylonian calendar.
yeah.
So
So
it's
if you go
actually
to the
July
Babylonian
19th.
calendar, it brings you to the 9th day of the 4th month, Tammuz. It brings you to July 18. So I'll just show people this here if you want to see this. So what we did is we went from the siege in 587, which was January 5th. And of course, that's going to be on the Julian calendar here. And that's going to be the 10th day of the 10th month on the Babylonian calendar down here. Right, so we got the Babylonian calendar. Oops. Right here, 10th day of the 10th month. Right, 10th month, 10th day. It's the same on the rabbinic, the same on the biblical. They all happen to line up at that in that year. And then we just count 560 days. And that's going to bring us to so this is an inclusive count, right? So that means from the first day to this day. So this is Tammuz 9. So you can see that this is going to be July 18th. You can see the biblical calendar wasn't being used there. We're using the Babylonian calendar. Ezekiel's in Babylon, right? So we got July 18th, 586. That's when the walls of Jerusalem come down. They're breached, they're broken. Okay, so that's fairly interesting. Okay, any other thoughts on these points here?
You were saying the walls of Jerusalem. We also represent the walls of Jerusalem as the Sabbath and the marriage, right?
Well, yeah, they're walls. I guess you could relate it there. I mean, I normally think of the law, the law is a wall. The walls of Jerusalem, of course, come down because of their transgression of the law. And if we go back to Judges 10, where we had, that's Daniel, Judges 10, dealing with Tola and Jair, we had these two periods of time. One was 23 years and the other was 22 years. And we never really dealt with that too much, other than we knew that these are both symbols of the 2300 days and symbols of restoration, right? So they relate to the studies that we have. But then we have the 30, the 30, and the 30 again. And so we have that symbol. in this story. So we can see that they're connected. But we have these other periods of years, right? So it's a different period of years, right? The other one is 25 years altogether. These ones are 45 years altogether. Now, altogether, that's 70 years. So would that be significance? If we're going to say that they're representing the same period, and Judges 10:1, of course, starts on the first day of the 10th month. That's the divorce. That's going to be at the end of January 11th. So is all of this representing this period of time from the end of our line, just showing us what happens after January 11th? I mean, it's a period of time. It's not like, something magical has to happen on January 11th, in my understanding. We're not looking for some specific event, but we are saying that this movement is going to continue to study. And we have these symbols: 23, 22, 45, 30, 30 times 3. And we can add that to the period of Judges 12, dealing with those 3 guys, Ibzan, and what their names are, Elon and
Abdon.
Abdon. That's it. Yeah. Right. So we can add them together. We get a period of 70 years. And if we divided that by 5, we would get the symbol of 14. Right, which is just 7 plus 7. So does that help tie those together?
It's going to take some time to consider that.
Okay. But we already established that these are the same periods, right? This is
Okay.
this marks the same point. This marks our movement after January 11th as a symbol, not necessarily literally that day. Because what's being marked is the divorce, right? The 88 days, which is 88 months, which brings us to April 5th, 2030, 2,640 days. Right. So we already have these symbols, and we can put these here, and we're already putting the other ones there. So I don't see how we could not continue to do this, that we could somehow, I mean, they're the same symbol. They're tied together. Altogether, they're 70 years. Even though they're separated, literally in time. When we lay them line upon line, they add up to 70 years. We have all these other symbols. So I think that we can do this. I think that this would make sense because we already understand it this way. So then what happens tomorrow is we're going to look at Samson again. And of course, Samson's this ironic line, and we just haven't drawn it on a line yet. So I'm going to need to draw out, well, we're going to have to draw this here. What I did with the end of this period is that we have this 1-year period from 2021 to 2022. which has to do with our invitation. But now this next part is just after that. So it's basically, again, everything's just leading us to 2023. And then that's where the book of Judges is leading us to. It's not giving us really light beyond there as far as it points us to 2030. That we have this application for additional extension of time to pay our taxes to Caesar, right?
Yeah, if we had the money to pay him.
Yeah, well, and then we're going to deal with the birth of Samson, which happens in Judges 13, which is a symbol of rebellion. Right, so that's where we're going to look tomorrow. So people need to look at that again. And we can start trying to draw Samson on a line. I mean, we already sort of know what we're doing with Samson. We just didn't actually draw it on a line. And I don't want to go through it in too much detail again, because that's been fairly recent since we did Samson. But we had a better idea by the time we did Samson on how to put these lines together. So any final comments?
None at the moment.
So let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are grateful, Lord, for what you have shown us here this morning. We understand our responsibility, and we just ask, Lord, for continued guidance in our invitation, our plans for making an invitation to the American and Canadian groups to study together, to examine these things. We know, Lord, we need your Holy Spirit to work upon not just their hearts, but our own. And we ask for wisdom. Please be with each person, watch over them, and continue to guide our feet. We pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen.